On this episode, I have with me Vikas Kumar Sharma. He's the head of data, AI, and ML at CNA Insurance. We're going to be talking about productizing data and what it means and some of the ramifications of companies that are moving from legacy to cloud and prioritizing business value, a whole host of different things. We'll see how much we can cover. Vikas, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Amir. Pleasure to be here, and then it's an honor to speak with you about this. So, just to start, I just want to make sure that this is my personal thought. It is my current employer, my past employer. It's a journey I have gone through in the data space, and I want to share my learning from this journey with you, everybody here.
Awesome. So, I guess let's start from the top in terms of some of your responsibilities. I know obviously that your views are not CNA Insurance, but people are going to want to know kind of just who they are, just to have some context, and then what your responsibilities are as the head of data, AI, and ML before we dive in.
Yeah, I think the responsibility started all the way from how do you think about a data transformation in a holistic view, right? So when companies started to think about moving their ecosystem from on-premises to the cloud, what are the gotchas, what are the frameworks, what are the things in terms of platform, data, culture you need to be aware of, and then combine these together. So I think it's a fascinating story if you are working towards it or you're already in the process. What we have to think about is, when I say holistic, the holistic picture is how the data has been established in your organization, what currently people are using it, and how they are using it, and why they are using it. I think these are the three things you need to answer before you even think about it. What's the business value from this transformation, right? I over the last many years, what I've learned is moving the data is not going to solve everything. You need to tie that journey to business value. What business value you're going to deliver from this data, right? What are the KPIs you're going to improve? Start with very small KPIs, metrics, OKRs. That's how you're going to identify even the use cases which will help you find out which data and platform you need to target first. And then I would say that start thinking not from technology perspective, but from business perspective. Involve business from the beginning so that you get the best value from this journey. So I would say in and all, I think, and then we can go in and dive into technical specification about this. What's the manifest, and how do you do this whole charter? But in general, my opinion is, my point of view is, you start this from identifying, solving what business cases you're trying to solve, and then work backward.
So I guess in terms of when we talk about productizing data, we hear that a lot. Tell us what that really means. Why does somebody want to productize data?
So I think productizing data, and thank you for asking this question. I think there are many camp out there and many school of thoughts about this. And some people have different opinion about this. Everybody has let me contextualize this into my point of view. I think productionizing is data is again I will gonna reemphasize that tie to the business value. In my view, that a data product should directly or indirectly correlated or associated with the business value. So when I talk about, let's go a little deeper into this one. So when I talk about data products, let's say you create a data product for unification of the data. That itself can be a data product, right? So in on-premises world, in old world, you have data marts, you have Hadoop cluster, you have so many data marts out there, right? So how do you convert that into a data product into the cloud? So how do you leverage, and that's where it goes into the more technical specifications, right? Cloud gives you the capability of MPP databases like BigQuery, Snowflake, and Redshift, and things like that. So I think you start to think about, okay, if I use and bring this data from siloed on-premises data mart to one unified data product, to solve my business use cases, so that my business partners and my business data analysts are not going and struggling to search for the data. And then you start thinking about other data product as well. Catalog is a product itself. You can talk about it. And then could be a platform. You build a self-serve platform to bring this all together. So data mesh, I did a podcast a few weeks ago or months ago about data mesh. In Jamak actually talk about data products as a single dimension value proposition for the data mesh. And you have to tie this together. So I think what I'm trying to say here is start thinking about what objective you're trying to solve, compress and put a composition around that. So, for example, data product for unification of a data, it makes sense. Like people talk about data fabrics, right? That could be a data product itself. And then you see how we can tie this and make sure that, again, we go back to a data product. Once you establish the data product, then you start to build the characteristics around that, and then SLAs and OKR and things like that.
I appreciate the overview. I think that was quite helpful to hear that. I guess when you're looking at companies of different sizes, everyone's trying to take advantage of their data. Obviously, some are already in the cloud, some are legacy, but everyone wants to maximize the value of their data. And this concept of productizing data comes into play, and it adds potentially some complications because you haven't done some of the plumbing, or you need plumbing, and then you have to wait, and you have to wait for things to catch up. When you're looking at companies that are looking to bridge the gap, or even current companies, it doesn't matter. There's a certain amount of work that goes in. Same as software engineering. You can't just release a product. You need the plumbing to go in. You need the, before you see it. So it's all the same, I guess. But in when you're dealing with business, and where they're used to the not immediacy, but faster reports. Hey, I'll just go jump in Excel to do this, or hey, I can go do this faster. And now you're saying, hey, this is a product. Does that shift how leaders on the business side are looking at data and its delivery?
I think that's a fascinating question, Amir. I think the way I see is you need to, again, look at the data, and then I define data in two categories, right? The actionable data and then data insights only. So data insight, and you have to bring this together, actionable data insights, basically, and see what are the things you can do. And then it's not only just data scientists. I think what the way I see industry is moving, it's industry moving from BI to AI, and you will soon see that happening. But people have trusted BI for decades. If you look at it, right? If you look at it, Excel, right? It doesn't have to be fancy. What I'm trying to say here is you need to build the stakeholder trust into your data product, whatever you're doing it, right? Establishing a trust into a data product will go a long way. And how do you bring that trust? I think you start slowly. You add incremental value. You validate the business, and then say, hey, what I'm building is what is providing a value to you in your business. Can you were getting data maybe hourly, I can give you minutes, will it help you? So I think the conversation should start from the business, and then you start to identify what's the actionable data you can give it to them on what frequency once you have the data out there in the cloud. Another thing, you were talking about the software analogy. So in my view, what I see is data engineering actually has become probably software engineering plus data engineering together, combine it together, the way I see it. Because in software engineering, you have this React.js, and I can tell you my platform, some of the one I built in the past, has React, has microservices, has UI, has security, everything together, right? And then on top of that, you bring the data complexity. So, and that can itself add a lot of value if you do this right. Because, for instance, data and security, and is probably, if you do this right, will go a long way. And even in AI ML space, right? If you folks are familiar about training data and serving data has to flow all the way at the same data. Otherwise, you're gonna have problems, right? It's like a conductor of orchestration, right? Orchestration, a conductor has to make sure that no instrument goes out of the tune. Otherwise, your music will not sound good. So I think data really is a very powerful tool, but you have to use it right.
Let me actually ask you a question based off of that. So I definitely, you see the change in data whether it's data engineering, ML engineering, you see the impact of software engineering coming in, the APIs, you mentioned React, all those things. As you're looking to build teams and people are trying to productize data, what kind of changes happening to the makeup of a team? Right. So all of a sudden, unless you have, of course, shared services, it seems like there's a lot. You threw out a bunch of different stuff, some security, React, containers, infrastructure. I mean, there's a lot of different pieces you need to build out your platform to actually productize your data.
Yeah, I think, and you are absolutely right. I think the team composition is also what problem you're trying to solve. I think, to me, I think microservice is going to stay here forever. They're not going away, right? So I think that talent capability has to be there. Now you think about, from data engineering perspective, there are different languages and technologies out there people need to know. And if you bring the software side of it, I think React or AngularJS is because you need to build a UI for the interaction from the end user, right? If I'm building a self-service platform, I need to shape that and provide a user interface to some shape form so that people can interact with that, right? And that's helpful in provisioning the environment for you, provisioning the platform for you. And then you start to think about intricacies, right? You only see that outer picture. There are underneath that, as you talked about it, there are microservices, there are Kubernetes cluster, there are containers, there are securities, right? How you deal with your underneath platform. Hey, like for example, I wanted to build a data as a service, right? But without knowing where the data is. Data as a service should know, like, okay, this user have access to this XYZ data, and I can provision this data for him without him telling me. So what I can tell you one more extent is, your API should be able to find out a person belongs to this organization, he has this access, and the data as a service should be able to manifest that for him. Right? There are a lot of moving pieces here, but you need to make sure that it's built right. And one of the things I would emphasize here is auditable, right? Auditability about these platforms, right? Who's accessing what, the observability of this platform, who's accessing what at what time, because one thing, you don't want to just provide access and forget about it. You don't want to provision data and forget about it. Cloud also give you capability to create cluster on fly, but then you have to make sure that they are used for the right workload and they are gone when the workload is not needed. That's where the serverless come into the picture. So there are many things that people in the mix right now, but we were talking about team composition. So I will quickly jump onto team composition. I think it's a workload related. You have a bigger problem to solve, but I would suggest you start to composition that problem into building blocks. And that's how you allocate team to build those building blocks.
And that's interesting, because I think as you're kind of talking about the building blocks and the different skill sets, right? The shift you mentioned, from BI to what it is, analytics, data science, AI. I mean, it seems like the complexity has been increasing. I guess from your perspective, I mean, you're a leader within the data AI ML space. I'm sure you have phenomenal team underneath you. How do you start your roadmap and planning? So if you're trying to actually, that's the question. Maybe let's start there. How do you actually build that roadmap out with all these different components, all the nuances and changes and developments? How do you start establishing something like that?
It's actually, this question is very near and dear to my heart, and I'll tell you why. Because I think one of the things I'm trying to infuse into my teams and everybody and the leaders, I'm sure everybody will appreciate it, that, and then some companies still do. I'm not going to name them. They will try to do the shiny object. Like, let's build this everything from the shiny object. What I have learned over time is, you sit with customer, interview your customer, see what they are trying to do, see what are their pain points, and ask multiple whys. I think in the product industry, I'm sure people who work in product understand this analogy. Ask why are they doing that, right? So you build your product based on customer needs, what they wanted to do, and what are the pain points they have it. Then you start to work backward into your team. And first of all, not just the team, start creating the vision for that, what they really need, and make sure you socialize that vision with your customers, right? Because you want to make sure what you're building is useful for them. And then you decompose that into strategies. I would say vision has to decompose. So I'm not even talking about teams right now here. We're talking about just creating the vision and strategies for this data product. And then strategies will have a clear goals. This is what we want to build, incremental product. And then once you have incremental task and stories or apps, whatever you want to call it in the real world, then you start to decompose the teams. For example, for like ML ops is a very fancy word right now. Everybody's talking about ML ops. But if you look at the underneath the ML ops, there are three major components the way I see it. One is the data ops, other is the feature ops, and the third is the model ops, right? And if you look at it, everything together in the model engineering and AI/ML workspace, the model code is only 10 to 20%. Rest is 80%. So how do you make sure that you build 80% right to make this 20% successful?
That's actually really interesting. And I think to kind of go back to, you obviously walked us through some of those decision points. How do you factor in the rapid changes that are also coming, right? There's like literally things popping on the horizon that no one thought about. You have to start, maybe anticipating or strategically planning around potential and other options. And as the complexities change, and all of a sudden now you're responsible for an ML team, an AI team, training data, not just producing analytics or reporting. When you start factoring in some of those complexities in planning, quarters on out, how do you actually then not become maybe, and I know there's going to be a lot of this going to be business value driven, but how do you keep trying to make sure that you're tying the business value, the ROI, to the stuff that's coming out maybe a quarter or two down the road?
Yeah, I think again you took part of my answer out already, but I think I'll try to rephrase it differently. I think, for example, there's LLMs coming, there's Gen AI coming, and everybody's trying to get into that so they're not left behind. But I would say, but there's a component from even for this initiative which goes tie back to the business, and maybe perhaps in this journey they don't know the value, they don't know yet. They will still figure it out. So that's a unique thing about this one right now. But I will tell you that you still have to figure it out what data you're going to expose to this one. So as long as you know which data you're trying to expose and utilize it, and again, it's going to be risk and reward. The pendulum has to say, okay, what's the risk here? What's the reward here, right? So I think this is something is new, and everybody's trying to get into this train so that it doesn't leave the platform. But I would say, from the platform perspective, I think one good thing about the data ecosystem and open source community, they are proactively thinking about these things and making it available for us to consume. So as long as your ecosystem, if you tie to a Google, if you tie to Amazon, if you tie to other cloud provider, they are proactively bringing these technologies together. But if you have a open source based platform, they are also actively trying to bring this thing together. So the good thing about the data ecosystem, I would say, is everybody's aware of it. I mean, they might be in beta, but I think you have to take your own risk and maybe not do it in production right away, but it's test and learn in your sandbox environment and see what you can do around that one.
And I actually like how you phrased the risk reward. You don't want to be left at the train station. And also, I guess when you look at that, I mean, you can be incorrect as well. You could have journeyed down a path that's a dead end, or a road that's less than ideal. Maybe it was a quick surge and people thought, and it didn't materialize. So I guess as you mentioned, you don't want to be left behind at the train station. Being early has its advantages, it has its dangers. Without risk reward, back to the business value for your organization, how do you evaluate that, right? Because obviously if you're too early and maybe it doesn't materialize, you spent resources on something that doesn't have any upside. If you wait too long and all your competitors are leveraging it, then you're playing catch up. I asked it differently to the same question. I'm just kind of curious how you kind of view that situation.
And so I would just provide my personal opinion on this one because this is a very sensitive topic. I think if an organization can identify the right use cases, and then I think the philosophy of crawl, walk, run doesn't go away. I would still say you try to crawl, you learn from it. And then if you do this right, it's like a philosophy what Apple does, right? Apple do it right, but they take time to do it right. They don't care about if the competitor is building something out they want to miss the train. I would say try to do it right and use the framework crawl, walk, and run. That will be my personal suggestion, right? And I think identifying the right use cases. It could be that you identify the use cases which is hard to solve, but I think but that use cases give you the hyper value. Let's work towards it. In a I worked in a startup. What I've learned about it is basically there are many jillions priority, right? So you identify which priority will give you the uplift from your ecosystem, and so start building towards it. So I think it's a mix of balancing the priority, identifying what's the value is, and then do we have the data available for that? I think that's people may still miss out that one, right? Do you have the data for that one to make that successful?
As a leader, when you're doing your job, do you have to change how you've approached your role and your vision, your strategy based on the rapid pace of change that's hitting data? All these different things that we've talked about so far on the show. They make me feel like, man, you've got to be, your leadership style even has to evolve because so many pivots, so many adjustments, so much rapid change. Have you seen a change in your own leadership style?
In my leadership style is I measure my leadership style on the point of time. So at what point in time I'm reacting to situations, right? There is no set framework which you can apply to all of the situations, right? So I think leadership style is something which I adopt as based on the current measurement or current scenario which I'm dealing with. So sometime I had to go and then empower people to based on my learning that guys, this is something we can do it. Right? You have to think big about this one. Sometimes you have to stay then and put a fence out there. No, this is not available. We are not this ready to adopt this. So those are things I would say my leadership style in terms of working is it depends upon what situation I'm dealing with, but I have an open mind about everything, even for Gen AI and other technologies as well. But I think, and then you should always try and test these things. I think otherwise, so my style is you should always try. If it's failed, it's fine. You at least did it, so you don't have a regret about I did not try that.
And I think that's a great, it is a framework in of itself of, I think what you described is your own framework of being flexible, adaptive, and, being quick to change to the needs of the business. And everything you've said kind of aligns to that thus far in the show. When you're watching other leaders come up to the organization, obviously, and you're seeing their strengths and weaknesses, how do you help them understand areas to work on? Because obviously you can look back now and kind of determine how you approach problem solving. But, as you have leaders that are emerging and growing into new leadership roles, they need some of that mentorship and helping them find what works for them, but sprinkling in some of the best practices you've come up with.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think, and everybody in every organization try to tell the leaders, hey, if you have gone tomorrow, what's going to happen to this workspace? So I think so what I tell is it's a learning process, and we make sure that you socialize from what you have learned so far, right? How do you approach a certain scenarios? How do you react to certain situations? I have realized that don't react to situations. I think, and you won't believe how many of us do that still. So I think a situation reaction is the worst thing for a leader. So I would say don't react to situation. And I've seen in a startup, I'll tell you, is that all of a sudden my CEO and CTO president wants, I want this to be done tomorrow. I want this to be done in 1 week. So okay, you don't react at that time. You come next day and have a conversation with them, because if you're going to have this conversation that day, you're not going to win that conversation. I can tell you that. So, so situation is like you absorb the things, you identify what is it trying to ask you to build. You create the data points around that one. That okay, if you think it's a good idea, of course go for it. But if you think it's gonna change the team dynamics, if you think it's gonna derail everything what we're doing it, then have a candid conversation with them and see, okay, these are the things I'm currently having plate, and you want me to work on these things. Let's sit and talk about it. What's the business value? What's the ROI from this versus this one? And if you really want to do that one, then give us a capacity to work on it, and we'll work on it.
I mean, that's pretty good observation. I appreciate that. I was going to say, I could definitely keep, asking you questions along this line of thought. I think you've got answers for everybody. I know you got to get back to your day job. I was going to ask you. I like to ask everyone on the show this question. If you could ask a future guest to cover a topic for you on the show, what would you like to hear about?
I think I would like to probably talk about what current hyper talk right now, which is Gen AI and LLMs, and how people are. If you are reading about it, and I have had talks with one of my mentors and leaders, and they are currently reading at least couple of hours every day about this one. As they talk about the train leaving the platform, I think they want to make sure they're a driver of that train. So I think something about is, and I am candidly trying to read through, but it's so much out there. It has just come up like a mushroom, all together. And how do you deal with it? It's very hard. So I think if you have a future guest, see, okay, what are their thoughts on this? And overall, one of the things I am trying to see is this overall AI ML ecosystem, how this is evolving. I I can tell you that I think 70-80% experiment doesn't go to the fruition. They just died out there because either the feature is wrong, either the business proposition is gone by the time you build the solution, or the data is not available for us. Or so I think those are the few thoughts I have. I think which I'm going to probably would like to talk about. I can talk about it if you want me to, but something for future guests.
Awesome. Yeah, no, maybe we do a follow-up, maybe a round table, something like that. I think those are great topics. Because how should somebody contact you if they want to pick your brain on anything you mentioned on the show?
I have a LinkedIn profile, which I think you want to mention it, but I have a Twitter account as well, Vikas Kumar 9, which so happy to talk to anybody. I'm always learning, and that's one thing I'm not gonna probably lose. Is just always learning.
Absolutely. I love it. Thank you for being on. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Amir, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. That's it for today's episode. Back in different guest, different topic. If you found the podcast useful, please share it with someone else who might. That's how the podcast grows. Like, subscribe, leave a review wherever you are listening to this episode. I'd appreciate that. Thank you and goodbye.